Is it that much of a stretch to say that everybody outside of Anthony Davis and LeBron James have failed to live up to expectation? Welcome back to the Kenny Beecham podcast, y'all. It feels so good to say those words. I've been waiting to get off an episode. I hope you had a good holiday. Lord knows I did. Spent some time with some family. The holiday season is always very hectic for us, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't put together an episode where we have Christmas here. We go to my mom, my dad. We go to my wife's mom, her dad, and then grandparents. We go all over the place in like a 2-day span. So I was burnt out, and I needed a little bit of a break. But I mean, it was a break in the terms of filming, but I did spend the last, 12 days or however long it's really been since the last episode, really thinking about this podcast, this show, and trying to figure out what I want my voice to be here. I'm going to give you a little peek behind the curtain for the people at home. I'm assuming that majority of y'all that's listening / watching to this podcast are aware of the other content that I create, mostly on YouTube and maybe some of the other platforms. And some people have noticed that the Kenny Beecham podcast is a lot more scripted than some of the other stuff. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. You got to think about what the content really is on the Kenny Beecham podcast. It is a 30 minutes to an hour of really a one-man show. Hell, without a script, without some type of outline / run a show, it would be awful. But I also think I was a little bit too strict. You know what I'm saying? So over these next couple weeks and months, I will be experimenting a little bit. Back in the day, back when the world was closed down, I used to do this series on YouTube that a lot of people may remember as the NBA Rumble, where I would watch a handful of NBA games and I would go down to the basement with nothing, no script, no notes, and just talk into a microphone and a camera about the things I saw. And it actually opened me up a little bit more to being more fluid on camera and kind of thinking about the game deeper than what I saw on court and everything. So I'm hoping that the Kenny Beecham podcast can be an extension of that. So yes, I do have bullet notes and some statistics and stuff. I do want to say I want it to be a little bit more laid back than what we've seen for the first, 6 months of existence of this show. I do want to say at home, be sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're here on YouTube. Go over to the audio platform, Spotify, Apple, give us 5 stars. When you think about taking a 12-day break, and again, I just made that number up. It could have been 30 days. I really don't know. The algorithm is not going to do you justice. So I ain't even looked to see where we at on the charts. I'm actually afraid to look to see where we at the charts, but we back on it and we here for the content. I kind of wanted to talk about some teams that I'm expecting, or I'm telling them that it is time to make a trade. Now, I think that most of the trades that will happen this season will start once the calendar year turns around. I would hate to be a day after Christmas and then find out that I got to move my whole family. So I'm assuming that when trades do start happening, it will be in January, specifically around January 15th, because again, you know how it works. Most people that sign their contract during this offseason were eligible to be traded December 15th, and the people that sign extensions is more like January 15th. Obviously, the trade deadline's a few weeks after that, but there are a few teams. And listen, last year, we saw 28 teams make a trade or adjustment at the trade deadline. This is nothing new. Most teams, close to all of the teams in all of basketball, are going to make some type of trade this deadline. But I'm saying these 3 teams, I think, need to be doing it to a higher level. Because you think about those trades that went on. Some of them was like super role player for expiring contract. Didn't move the needle to either of the teams. You know what I'm saying? But these teams, the teams I'm going to be talking about today, need to probably put it together a little bit more. I'm speaking of only 28 teams making trades at the deadline. Do you remember what the 2 teams were that didn't? It was the Miami Heat, who, again, it turned out pretty well. They made a NBA Finals push. So shout out to Pat Riley. A lot of Heat fans were telling me that he slept through the deadline again. And then the Bulls were the second one. And that didn't look good for them. And I'm almost positive. I'm 98% sure the Bulls are making a trade this deadline. Book it, lock it in. So we're gonna talk about 3 teams I think need to be making deals. And again, this is a fluid conversation. You can let me know in the comment section some other teams that should be added to this list. I also got my favorite segment, the Ask KB, where I talk to you guys, the viewers of the channel, the listeners of the show. Use the hashtag AskKB and send me questions, and I pick out some of my favorites to answer. Let's start up top with the LA Lakers. has not been pretty for the LA Lakers outside of the in-season tournament, which is such a surprise. This was a team that I was super excited for coming into the season. Obviously, the second half of the year, they were really killing the game. They had one of the best defenses of all time in that stretch. And it's like, okay, they're going to have some continuity, something that, as far as LeBron Laker teams haven't really had from year to year. They pretty much brought back the same roster, then added some pieces like Gabe Vincent, who's out for 6 to 8 with a orthoscopic knee surgery or something like that. For the most part, they brought back the core guys that helped them go on that conference finals push last season, and I thought that continuity would really improve the way they were going to play this season. I have been wrong so far. Now, I do want to say they've dealt with a lot of injuries, but hell, a lot of teams in basketball have dealt with injuries, so I'm not using that as like this thing to save the Lakers, because you think about Anthony Davis and LeBron, the two top 10-ish guys in all of basketball. Those guys have been relatively healthy this season. Of course, AD's missed a few, LeBron has missed a few, but for the most part, these guys, their top-end dudes, have been healthy, and yet they haven't been nearly as good as they were in the second half of the season. The question is, why is that? And I was thinking about it quite a bit, and I guess you can go into some X's and O's. Obviously, that's not who I am as a I don't know, creator of basketball content. But one thing, I was just looking at the roster. I watched their most recent game on Christmas, and I was like, man, is it that much of a stretch to say that everybody outside of Anthony Davis and LeBron James have failed to live up to expectation? Now, Austin Reeves has put it together after the 9-game stretch where he was starting off the bench. Austin Reeves has been really good, but as of recently, he's only been putting up, 20 to 26 minutes per game. But for the most part, let's say 2.5 players, AD, LeBron, and then half of Austin Reeves. Everybody else has been disappointing to an extent, right? Like Cam Reddish has come in and played some phenomenal defense for them and helped them out, but he also is still a 30% three-point shooter that teams are completely leaving open. V8, who's no longer V8, but I will always call him that because it's such a dope nickname, has been out, and Rui Hachimura, who got the extension, hasn't been as good as we saw him be in the playoffs. So I was talking to my Lakers guys, like, is that crazy to say? And they're like, Kenny, we've been saying that on Lakers Twitter for about a month or so. I ain't locked in on Lakers Twitter as much as I thought I was. But when you look at this roster, everybody outside of the top 2.5 people have been relatively disappointed. Even D'Angelo Russell, who's some days D'Angelo Russell's really solid, and other days he's coming to the press conference saying, hey, if I can't hit my shots, I'm not contributing. I've never seen a player be as candid as that. When I'm not hitting my shots, I'm not contributing to the team. And as of recently, he's not. He had a whole month stretch in November where he was on fire, and he was like, oh, okay. He said he wanted to be Derek White. He maybe not that, but at least he could shoot. He's no longer hitting shots. Rui Hachimura hasn't been very good. And I mean, Christian Wood, who was like a end of the deadline, I mean, like free agent signing, is DNP coach decisions a lot of nights. So this has been a team that hasn't lived up to the expectations. And obviously, when you talk about the Lakers and you're talking about a LeBron James-led team, you have to think about how can we improve the championship window. The man is nearly 40 years old, and though he's having a phenomenal season by himself, we can't just expect that next year's LeBron is going to play to this caliber, or the year after that LeBron is going to play to this caliber. We have to take it in as it is right now and say, hey, what can we do this season? What can we do this season to increase our odds of winning a championship? You think about those odds. Shout out to FanDuel Sportsbook, because I have those odds right here in front of me. The Lakers opened up this season as a plus 700 to win the Western Conference, which is not too bad. You know what I'm saying? Not too bad. You think about the Denver Nuggets and how dominant they were in their finals run. Nobody expected anybody outside the Denver Nuggets to win the conference as far as we talk about odds. That 700 has now got all the way up to 1,000. So the team that a lot of us believed in being a contention, the team that we thought could potentially win the West, has fallen off. And you look at the people around them, of course, the Nuggets being the top. The Nuggets are playing phenomenal basketball as of recently. Shout out to the Nuggets. And that's after Michael Porter Jr. came onto this podcast and told us about the championship hangover that they're kind of dealing with. The Suns are number 2, which I guess we could talk about a little bit because they haven't looked really good either. And Bradley Beal is out for even more time. The Clippers are number 3, and the Clippers are playing great ball, specifically when Kawhi Leonard is there. The Wolves are 4th, which is funny because they're the top of the conference. But you know, a lot of people aren't believing in the Wolves, and I understand. I'm not saying I'm in that boat, but I understand that. And the Lakers are number 5. The actually surprising thing is that the Clippers opened up the season as a plus 1,000, and now them and the Lakers have kind of shifted this way through the season. So they need to figure out the deals to flip those odds, to give them a better chance to win that championship. Now, there's been a lot of reporting over the last couple of weeks as I feel like we're getting closer and closer to trade season. That's why we're doing this episode where Woj and Shams put out different reports about what the LA Lakers are thinking about. Now, Shams came out a couple days ago on Running Back and talked about the Lakers being buyers, as always, and mentioned people like DeJounte Murray. Now, also, he mentioned that in order to make a DeJounte Murray trade happen, they'd have to give up Austin Reeves, and they're extremely, extremely hesitant to make that happen. So is that just conversation? Yeah, probably, but it does tell us that maybe there's a mold of player that they're going after. And then right before I started filming this episode, Woj reported that they're looking for speed and athleticism, which fits the DeJounte Murray mold. I also was thinking like, hey, I know a guy that's pretty speedy and won a dunk contest back in the day. Do you want him? That's the problem with trying to orchestrate these LA Laker trades, right? They have to try to bridge this. And I talked about this significantly when we talk about the Golden State Warriors. And one thing they failed at as an organization recently is bridging the gap between the Steph Curry era and then whatever era was coming up. They did really good with Jordan Poole at the end of the first round. Obviously, he helped them win a championship. And then when you think about their lottery picks, the lottery picks they had in that one draft with Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, and James Wiseman, they missed on those. This current pool, by the way, going on a tangent, it's a ramble, with the Golden State Warriors, you think about Brandon Podziemski and Trace Jackson Davis. These two dudes have impacted Warriors ball more than those three dudes from 4 years ago already, and it's only a month or 2 months into their NBA careers. But the Lakers have to figure out how to bridge the gap because, again, the LeBron era will eventually end. I should have asked you to close your ears if you ain't want to hear some crazy stuff. But eventually, the LeBron James era of him being one of the greatest in basketball will end. It is inevitable. Will it happen when he's 50, when he's 70? We don't know, but it will, right? And they need to find the player that can maybe help them win the championship right now, compete right now, but also bridge to the era where LeBron is not your 1A. Anthony Davis has been phenomenal, a DPOY candidate. He's been as aggressive as ever. There was a time in last year's season where he was consistently giving us 30s in all defensive level caliber play. And we're like, man, if AD can do this for an entire stretch, it's going to be hard to beat them. And he's putting that together. But it's not very hard to beat them. I'm thinking about Christmas night where Anthony Davis had a phenomenal game individually, and they weren't in the game. I know they had a little bit of a push, but for the most part, that was a Celtics win through and through. So they need to figure out who that guy is. You're like, okay, can DeJounte Murray be that guy? DeJounte Murray just signed an extension, a lot of money for DeJounte, but it's still, when you compare it to some of the other contracts across the association, like a Zach LaVine, who's potentially rumored to go there, DeJounte Murray's contract looks significantly better. And we're talking about a 27-year-old guy that has been maybe a little bit worse than most people expected playing off the ball, at least worse than I expected. I was kind of like, hell, that's a home run trade for the Atlanta Hawks. DeJounte can play on and off, and though he hasn't been bad, he's still averaging 20 points per game this season. It just doesn't look as good as I thought, but he has showed that he can at least do it a little bit. 27 years old. Could he be the guy that helped bridge the gap? But also, if you're trading up Austin Reeves, is it even worth it? Or you think about the bigger contract player in Zach LaVine, who went on to national TV in 2020 and said, hell, I would love to play with a guy like LeBron. I would love to play with a defensive center like Anthony Davis. He said that on national TV, y'all. That $40 million, you have to gut some of the depth that you have. And maybe part of you as a Laker fan, like, hell, none of those guys are performing to expectation anyway, so maybe I'm willing to do that right now because I watched this team play. And there's a lot of things wrong with it, right? They're a team that don't get up a lot of three-point shots in 2023, 2024, and they're a team that doesn't hit a ton of it. If you look at LeBron James' spacing statistic, where he's basically looking at the people around him, the other four people, his spacing mates, according to Thinking Basketball's Patreon stats, he's in the 19th percentile as far as spacing so far this season. They need some shooters. They need people that are willing and good at shooting. I know I'm thinking too much a little bit, but can you imagine replacing the Cam Reddish corner three-point shots with a guy of Zach LaVine's caliber? Now, obviously, Zach LaVine's not clamping up like Cam Reddish is, so there has to be some type of trade-off. And I don't know if I'm Rob Pelinka who that player is, but you have to find someone. And the Lakers have been, at least in recent history, after the championship, a name-chasing team. All right, you think about the Russell Westbrook trade. Fellas, everybody in between, they didn't need to make that trade. I was high on it. I'm not going to act like I knew it was going to fail. I thought that there was a phenomenal trade in the moment. But we just come off a championship, 16 months before that? We need to trade Kuzma, KCP for that. But Russell Westbrook is a name, and he had just had a really good season, right? I don't know if that's the route that Rob Pelinka wants to go again, because the last time he gutted most of his depth to bring in the name/big contract, it failed. Now, I do believe a guy like DeJounte Murray or a guy like Zach LaVine fits way better with Anthony Davis and LeBron than Russell Westbrook did when you think about them as spacing people. But still, do you want to pay Zach LaVine $40 million to be a third option? Do you want to pay DeJounte Murray next season $28.5 million to be a third option? I don't know the answer to that. Rob Pelinka might know the answer right now, just waiting for the time and moment. But that is a team that needs to do something, because as good as the Denver Nuggets are, and I've said this plenty of times on the show, as good as they are, they're not necessarily unfuckwittable. There's only been a few teams in the history of my lifetime where I looked at them and said, that team is unfuckwittable. And that the one team that immediately comes to mind had Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Klay Thompson in his prime, and Draymond Green in his prime. Every other team around that, I feel as though, could fall in a series. All you need is a little bit of luck. Maybe a lot bit of luck. But you need some luck, some good matchups, and boom, the Western Conference is wide open. Speaking of that, get well soon, Aaron Gordon. I'm sure some of y'all may have seen a report of Aaron Gordon, I guess, got attacked by a dog. And he's got some stitches in his hands and his face, and he gonna miss some time. So get well soon, man. I know people that, again, I don't know the extent of what happened with Aaron Gordon, but just going on the fact that they say he had 22 stitches, it had to be pretty brutal. I know some people that have gone through stuff like that with dogs, and it's not easy to recover from. I mean, like physically, sure, you get stitches, you're fine, right? But the mental aspect, don't really trust dogs, or I guess animals in general, as much as you did beforehand. So again, Aaron Gordon, get well soon. Let me know in the comment section or whatever what you think about these LA Lakers, and what is the potential deal? Is there somebody that's not even rumored that you were like, hell, if I'm the Lakers, I'm going after that person? Because we also have to think about the assets that the Lakers have. It's not many of them, especially if you're not having Austin Reeves on the table. So you have to think about a player that is potentially damaged goods in the eyes of trade value, because you don't have a ton to get a star in there, right? I'm going to keep bringing it up. But Zach LaVine is exactly that. But again, I'm not telling you that that's the trait you should do, but he's the mold of like a damaged goods player, where Zach LaVine's been out for a month and the team looks like a real basketball team, And all of the reports are saying that there's no market. So, hell, we ain't even got to give up much. Can we just match some salary, no picks? Maybe. I don't really know the answer to that. So you tell me in the comment section. This portion of the Kenny Beecham podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with winning any $5 money line bet. That is $150 in bonus bets if your team wins. What I would do is look over the full slate of games and try to pick out ones that I think there's a wide margin in talent. For example, the Milwaukee Bucks are going against the Chicago Bulls. The Bucks are playing some of the best basketball in the Giannis and Damian Lillard era, and the Bulls are waiting for their era to end. A $5 money line bet on Milwaukee, if they win, can turn into $150 in bonus bets for you. Or if you don't love that one, the New York Knicks are going against the Detroit Pistons. The Pistons have cemented themselves as the worst team of the season so far, and the Knicks are starting to find their groove. But that's just two examples. Maybe you want to bet on your favorite team. It's all up to you. All you have to do is visit FanDuel.com/Kenny so you can turn dimes into dollars. See what I did there? Now, the next team is different, because I talked about the Lakers and their struggles so far. This team has been very, very good to start off the season. And that team is the Philadelphia 76ers. Yep, I said it. Philly has the MVP, the reigning MVP of the league. And if you ask me right now, he is the MVP of the 2023-2024 season. And yet, I still do believe that they should make the moves. Now, there's a couple different ways you can look at this, right? Some people saw the James Harden trade and said, hell, they got 3 expiring contracts, all within $10 million to $15 million. Boom, that's $40-ish million they could pack together. They also got some first-round draft capital. They're going to be buyers. And then the team starts to play, and you're like, hold on, wait a minute. maybe we don't necessarily need to be biased because Maxey is a star in himself. Joel Embiid is having a better individual season than we've ever seen before. Maybe we could stand pat, look at the salary cap that we could potentially have, the cap space we could potentially have this offseason, and just chill. I think it's probably better to make the deal. Same thing I mentioned with the LA Lakers when I talk about it being open. Now, in the last episode, I mentioned that the Celtics they're close to that unfuckwittable I'm talking about, but they also don't have the depth as some of those other teams. And if I don't know, let's say if Porzingis goes down with an injury, I'm not saying it's wraps. It's significantly harder to win a championship without Porzingis. You get what I'm saying? Where that could be an opening space for the 76ers. And with Joel Embiid playing the way he is, and granted, I know the history of Joel Embiid come playoff time, high leverage situations. That's what we're missing for Joel Embiid as far as we talking about how good he ranks on the all-time centers list or whatever. He needs some high leverage wins. He needs some playoff success and potentially a ring or whatever. But they could still potentially do it. This free agency class, it's not that great. Call a spade a spade. It's not that great of a free agency class. We got people like Pascal Siakam, DeMar DeRozan, OG Anunoby, Klay Thompson. Good players, but not great players. Well, no, that's disrespectful. I would argue that Pascal Siakam is a great player. I would argue that DeMar DeRozan is a great player. I'll end it right there. 2023 Klay. Last month, Klay has been really good. Don't look at Christmas. Last month, Klay has been averaging 20-plus points and shooting 40% from three again. Don't sleep. They were winning games, too. But the free agency class in itself is not great. Not great enough to think that there's going to be a superstar player available potentially through free agency. But also, you can get free agency without thinking about free agency. Kenny, what do you mean by that? We've seen a lot of players go into the front office in the offseason and say, hey, I want out. And now, though this player is not actively on the market, they're actively on the market, right? And I know it's hard to predict. We don't really know who the people are going to be. We've seen out of nowhere players request a trade or so on and so forth. And I'm assuming that's the direction that Daryl Morey and company are thinking about is like, hell, we don't know who the next superstar player is going to be available. Who is it going to be? But we're going to try to stockpile our assets so we could be in the conversation. The disappointing part is that their assets aren't very great. You got the expiring contracts to make some money work. You got a couple first-round picks. Whoop-de-doo. There's some other teams. Hypothetically, the next superstar player goes on the trade market. You know who has way better assets that have been just prowling the market for a star? The New York Knicks. You taking the Knicks trade package, you taking 3 expiring contracts and 2 first-round picks from the 76ers. Like, you know what I'm saying? You're not, once the superstar become available, I'm just saying, based on what I know, I don't know if the 76ers are really going to have a chance without giving up the players that you really care about. And at this point in time, there's only 2 of them boys. There's only 2 of the boys that you look at and say untouchable at this moment in time. So I just don't know what that superstar is going to come in. So with the market being what the market is and parity being the association, ladies and gentlemen, Mook, get your bags packing. Nicholas Batum. You too. Rocco, we love you. Welcome back. I'm sorry. I hope you ain't about no house because you might be out the door. But I understand flexibility. I just don't know what the next star is. And I kind of want to go through the teams. And you tell me, even though I can't hear you right now. You tell me if you think there's going to be a star player from these teams becoming available in the next, let's say, 8 months. 8 months or so, right? We have the Celtics. You know them boys are safe, regardless if they are successful winning the ring or not. The Jays are not getting broken up, and if they are, it's not for 2 first-round picks and Robert Covington. It's not gonna be the Bucks, the Magic, the Heat, the Knicks, the Wolves, the Nuggets, the Thunder, the Mavs. If Luka, for whatever reason, because the Mavs are playing good basketball, for whatever reason request out, you don't have the package to make it happen. So the Mavs, the Kings, you're not getting any of those players. The only people that, again, and I'm saying this is a small percentage, because we don't do a good job of predicting the next starter one out. Donovan Mitchell. Everybody's talking about that one already. Mikal Bridges. Maybe he's available eventually. Kawhi, Paul George, both have yet to sign an extension. Again, we're talking about percentages, like 2% chance. Zion. Brandon Ingram. Devin Booker. Devin Booker's it's not happening. And the only reason I bring up Devin Booker is because there is obviously the reports about maybe Kevin Durant being frustrated. He went onto Instagram and said that that's cap. But I don't even know why I added it to my notes. This is why I shouldn't be taking notes. Why is Devin Booker? He's not. Anyway, So maybe some of those other guys become available. But again, it's kind of like a pipe dream at this point. So let's get in on some other players. Who is that player, Kenny? I've been very adamant about the Zach LaVine, Tyrese Maxey thing being something I do not want from a 76ers perspective. I just think it takes away who Tyrese Maxey has developed into and kind of relegates him a little bit more to be a lower usage player, which is inevitable, right? Whoever they trade for, his usage will drop a little bit. But because of the way Zach has played historically throughout his career, I think it takes away a little bit too much from Tyrese Maxey. Hell, maybe Zach LaVine goes to his next team and he's able to transition to playing more of a backup role, whatever. But still, I don't like that pairing. I'm just going on who's on the market potentially. DeJounte Murray fit. I don't hate it. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. The Lauri Markkanen thing. Lauri Markkanen is one of those players that I want to plop on so many contending teams and say he's the missing piece. A guy that can create for himself, is a quick decision maker in the sense that whether he's spotting up or not, he's going to know what he wants to do with that ball. I feel like that was one of the things I didn't see much when Lauri was here in Chicago, where it felt as though he was a little bit slow to make that decision, but now he's progressed as a player. He's an all-star at this point, and again, he's potentially on the market. Kevin O'Connor said that it might take 5 first-round picks, though, so you're out of the running there. I also don't think it has to be a superstar. Maybe it's a guy that comes in and just levels you up significant, like it's a small amount. He ain't got to be an all-star. Just levels you up a little bit. Because sometimes I watch this team play and I think about the load that Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey are carrying, and I look at the rest of the team, and though Toby has had his games here and there, or Kelly Oubre as a starter, there was a crazy stat about his game. I think he's only lost 2 games this season as a starter as part of the 76ers. Now, granted, he did miss a bunch of time after the car incident, but they are missing that 3 guy, another guy that could come in and score and provide some secondary playmaking outside of Tyrese Maxey, or I guess tertiary playmaking behind Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid. Again, I don't know who that player is, and Daryl Morey is the type of person, from my experience of watching him as a general manager, he ain't hanging up the phones. Actually, he's the one picking them up, just probing a little bit, trying to see who's available for this and that. And I don't know his psyche. I don't know if he will make a trade or try to make a trade too much. But as a guy that's been watching this team pretty extensively over the past month and a half, I feel like they could use just a little bit more help. Speaking of Joel Embiid and the 76ers, I'm just going to go on a tangent about the dominance that is Joel Embiid. Because obviously I saw him dominate the regular season last year as well. I had to say regular season. And he was my MVP, right? He was my MVP. I never thought twice about it. It fluctuated a bunch throughout the season. Sometimes it was Jokic, sometimes it was Joel Embiid. And once it was all said and done and all 30 teams have played 82 games, he was the guy that I believed had the best individual season come regular season, right? And after what happened in the playoffs, I went on to my other podcast, rest in peace. No, it's not dead. I don't even know why I'm making those jokes. And said, because of his flame out in the playoffs again, where Tatum had that boy on an island in the game 7 and gave him 50, I don't think that the voters will give him the respect of giving him another regular season MVP, because we see the conversations around a player like Joel Embiid say, hey, we know you're a phenomenal player in the regular season, but legends are made after April. And yet, here we are. 2 months into the season, and he's the MVP right now. Not consensus, but close to it. And I'm just surprised to see that. And I think that's a testament to how good he really has been. If he was doing the exact same thing this year as last year, I don't think he would be the MVP frontrunner. But he took the season, regular season, that he built last year and said, give me 2 more of them. What's the LeBron James meme where he's talking about A&R and the 2 Chainz album? 2 more, talking about the deluxe. I need more of that. And he did. James Harden out the door. I've been practicing my playmaking. I am a positive, and he was already a decent playmaker. I am a positive playmaker. You cannot guard me. I know everybody's going to say Al Horford, because of Al Horford has notoriously been known as the Joel Embiid stopper, which numbers are numbers, right? So far this season, nobody has been able to stop this man. Granted, There's been some games where he did not suit up, and I was waiting for him to suit up. I wanted to see him versus Bam. You know what I'm saying? But when he went against the Minnesota Timberwolves about a week or so ago, a little bit before Christmas, and he went at the current DPOY and Rudy Gobert and gave, I don't even remember what the number was. Just say he gave them the work. That might have been my second favorite Joel Embiid performance in the last year and a half, 2 years. Not just because of the counting stats, because he went into against the number one defense in all of basketball that has, again, Rudy Gobert is almost a consensus DPOY so far this season, and said, you can't stop me, right? I know a lot of people are going to look at the foul drawing, the grifting, whatever you want to call it, and say, hell, Kenny, he's doing this for the fouls, boom, 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 boom. And everybody's tied to their own opinion, and I respect yours. I have looked past that. Because even if you get rid of every single free throw that Joel Embiid has shot this season, and you get rid of every single free throw that every player has shot this season, there's no free throws. What do you think Joel Embiid ranks as far as points per game? Yeah, he's still number one. If you get rid of every single free throw that he shot specifically against the Timberwolves in that game, he still had 36. Again, I understand it not being everybody's cup of tea. Hell, go watch videos of mine from 2 years ago, 3 years ago. I was very adamant about it. I respect Joel Embiid's game, but hell, it's a tough watch. I don't really feel that way anymore. Yeah, their games end up being 30 minutes longer than everybody else's, it feels like. But I don't feel that way anymore. I think it's more of a testament to Joel Embiid, more to the officiating than Joel Embiid. Because Joel Embiid's not the only person that does this. He's just a guy that probably he's number one at that at the moment. But he's not the only one. It's happening all across the association, from superstars to role players. He's just a guy with one of the highest uses in the league and is a big body, you can guard me guy. So yes, he plays it a little bit more. We just watched Nikola Jokic do it now. Jokic has one of the worst whistles in all of basketball. I honestly do believe that. He has one of the worst whistles in all of basketball. On Christmas, he had the best whistle I've ever seen. And he played into it, as he should. Because at this point in time, though your counting stats matter, these boys are out here trying to win basketball games. And Joel Embiid is a player that we've talked about mostly through the last, let's say, less than the last 2 years, but before that, his conditioning, he's out of shape, he do this, do. You know, when you get a little bit of a rest at that foul line, it ain't no coincidence, you know? The numbers that, the things that this guy's doing in a lot of times, it's 3/4, is otherworldly. And I had to sit back and think about, is he the best scoring big I have ever seen with my own two eyes? Now, a lot of people are going to say Hakeem and all of these players. I didn't see Hakeem play basketball with my own two eyes. Now, I saw the dominance of Shaquille O'Neal. Yep. So it's hard to go against that fella. But when I think about just pure scoring at the 5-man position, there's not many people that's comparing. You had a couple seasons. Now, again, I'm just talking about the ways in which they score. We're talking all 3 levels and being a engine and hub of an offense at this point. I think a little bit about I'm going to discredit myself a little bit by saying this, but I don't even care. I think a little bit about Boogie. Now, Boogie was never able to help his team make a playoff appearance, so it's fallen on deaf ears for a lot of people, and I understand that. But Joel Embiid in itself, he might be, and I might do an episode about this in the offseason because I think it's just too much basketball going around for me to go into a big, deep research thing. But just off the top of my mind, as far as in my lifetime, as far as the people I have watched play this game, and again, for the people at home, I started watching in 2002. I was 6 years old there, but that's when I started watching. Joel Embiid is a top 10 scorer I've ever watched play basketball. He's top 10 at this point. And again, I haven't dug completely into it, but that's what it feels like. Again, I understand that he does grift for his fouls and he does shoot a lot of free throws. But in the grand scheme of the league, the grand scheme of the 76ers, they take free throws, but it's not like crazy different than any other team. He just so happened to be the guy that's taking the most of them for his team. And he's become so good of an offensive player. And I know it's a lot of Joel Embiid, but hell, this is a ramble. I told you that. Joel Embiid has become so good of an offensive player that the fact that this man is playing all defensive level defense is just not even mentioned ever. Ever. Based on what I have seen so far this season, he has been one of the 5 most impactful centers in basketball. Well, when we go down to centers, he might be 3. I'm thinking Rudy Gobert. I'm thinking Anthony Davis. I'm thinking Bam Adebayo. This is gonna be really crazy. And Nick Claxton, I got to give you my respect, but he just missed a little bit too much for me. I also think about Chet. Joel Embiid is in that conversation. He might be higher than Chet. Actually, I will say he's higher than Chet, but he's in the top 5 amongst defensive centers in basketball, while simultaneously leading the league in all of scoring. This man can benefit so much from one real playoff push, one championship, one finals appearance. Hell, get out of the second round. I just don't. He's so damn good. But obviously, he's got this big chunk of missing games in high leverage situations. And even on the game-by-game basis, when you talk about playing in the clutch, can use some dramatic improvement there. I've watched their clutch games this year. I watched one here in Chicago. Ball slipped out of Joel Embiid's hands. Not great. So he's not the perfect player. But he is a guy, out of all of the people in basketball, who could benefit the most from a singular ring. It's that man. Because I don't even know the conversations you're going to have. Him and Jokic will be, again, hypothetically, if he wins this championship this year, and he does win MVP, because, again, he's the front runner right now. Two rings in the championship. I'm sorry, 2 MVPs in the championship. He would be the 14th player of all time to ever do that? Like, come on, man, the conversation would be crazy. But again, I'm living in this hypothetical world. I know most of y'all are like, Kenny, cut it. He don't do nothing after April. I can't say that he ever will. But I'm enjoying watching him play on a day-by-day basis because he is as dominant as I have seen from the 5-man on both sides of the floor, really. Now, before we go to talk about the third and final team that should be making a trade, it's time for my favorite segment, #AskKB. And every episode I'll be thinking, maybe do we need some music, a theme song or something? I don't know. The first one comes from Sammy. That's Houston Sammy. That's what your name is going to be to me. Anyway. How would you approach this Jalen Green situation coming into his contract year? What is your opinions on all the drama between the fans and Jalen Green product on the court? Now, I cannot say I am in tune to Rockets Twitter as much to know what the drama is. I'm going to assume that maybe the drama has to do with him not playing very well and then being upset about it. As I'm recording this, I just checked the box score against the Phoenix Suns. They were down by 12 points, but he had 20 points. So that's good stuff because there's been a few times this season, and mostly recently, where the Houston Rockets' objective is to win basketball games, right? We've seen the shift from the Houston Rockets, where they went from a team that was maybe not actively trying to be bad. Actually, let's say that. They were actively trying to get bad, and that's how you end up with Jalen Green as a lottery pick and Jabari Smith Jr. as a lottery pick and Amen Thompson as a lottery pick. But now, with them not owning their own first-round pick, they went out to get some vets, and they're actively trying to be good. And if there is a player, whether he's a player you've invested into a lot or not, if he's not helping you win basketball games, sit your ass down. And we've seen a lot of moments where Jalen Green has had to sit down. The game recently, oh man, who was it against? I just rewatched. It was against the Indiana Pacers. And Jalen Green played, 19 total minutes in this one? He was pretty dreadful. And again, I haven't watched this game, but he had 20 points as I went to transition to the segment, so maybe it's looking a little bit better. He is a guy that I've historically said, if you ask me about Jalen Green, I will tell you I have no opinion because I can't really gauge who he is as a player. And I think I have a pretty decent, kind of track record. Not saying I can understand the ceilings of players, because again, one of my favorite players in the league is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander from the first moment he was in the league or his summer league games, and I didn't think he was going to be a superstar. But I can typically gauge if this player is going to be really good or not, right? I have no idea with Jalen Green. And when Michael Porter Jr. was on the show, he mentioned something that I've been thinking about a lot since the moment. We asked him about the memes, and now rewatching that, I can kind of tell he's kind of frustrated with that moment in the interview. I talked about him being known across social media as a guy that doesn't swing one more passes, yada, yada, yada. But one thing he did mention was that he's a play finisher and not a playmaker. Pretty interesting concept. And when you look at him, Obviously, he is that. And sometimes I look at Jalen Green and say that he is a inefficient play finisher. Now, granted, we talk about a kid that's not even 22 years old just yet, so I'm not saying that he's got to be given up on by the Houston Rockets or that he can't blossom into somebody that they expect him to be, but it is tough to really win your minutes on a team that's trying to be competitive when your role is a play finisher and you're not finishing plays. Where he's not the Michael Porter Jr. type play finisher, right? He is a guy that will make an extra pass or will make a little bit. But for the most part, when you think about Jalen Green's game, it's heavily, I'm going to get myself a bucket, which can be fine. We know a lot of players that are great in this league that are, I'm going to get myself a bucket guy. But they also are maybe a little bit more dynamic than Jalen Green. Again, we're talking about a guy that's not 22, but this is a guy like Sam mentioned is up for a contract relatively soon. So what do you pay him? Do you pay him based on his production so far in his NBA career, or you pay him based on the player that you think he could be? The best thing that happened to the Houston Rockets is like Tari Eason and Alperen Sengun looking way better than what they should, given their draft spot. Because Jalen Green is a guy that when you think about who the Houston Rockets are, his success matters a ton. It just really does. You think about the years of not being so great. Was it 4 straight years towards the top of the lottery, or 3 straight years towards the top of the lottery? He is their prize jewel. He is their highest drafted guy. And yet, if you are hierarching or ranking the players and their significance on the team so far this season, he don't look like that. I watched all of his minutes versus the Indiana Pacers and all of his minutes versus, his previous game. And maybe it's just 2 games where I picked the wrong ones, right? And when I say all of his minutes, I don't mean that I was just watching the Rockets. My eyes are glued onto Jalen specifically, and there are just a lot of moments offensively and defensively where I was less than impressed. Synergy is a thing that you can buy. It's hell expensive. I actually don't recommend it to anybody. It's $50 a month, but I use it as a place to kind of look at some NBA statistics and stuff. And they have this one thing where you kind of look at every single player's play type, right? We're talking about catch and shoot, off the dribble pull-ups. We're talking about floaters, dunks, any type of shot you can imagine. They have it in the statistic for it. What is his points per possession when he takes that? What percentile is he in? Is he excellent at it? Is he well below average? And if you look at everything for Jalen Green this season, it is below average, except for him as a cutter, which is something that I wrote in my notes when I watched him. When he cuts and they find him, he is an elite level finisher. The problem is, doesn't cut nearly as much as you probably want him to, and maybe that's a little bit of him, maybe that's a little bit of coaching, but he doesn't cut as nearly as much as you want him to, and there are times where he gets missed on the cut. This is a team that doesn't necessarily need an inefficient play finisher, but needs somebody as a secondary playmaker. Freddie's doing that to the highest degree. He has one of the best assist-to-turnover ratios in all of basketball. Alperen Sengun has like this idea, the idea of Alperen Sengun as a playmaker is maybe higher than where he is as a player right now. Last year, I would argue that his playmaking was a lot better than this year. That's just me as a guy that's not watching all the minutes of Houston Rockets, but just based on what I've seen so far. He's taking the next step on the other spots, but his playmaking may be a little back step. So this is a team that could use an extra playmaker because Jabari Smith Jr. is also a play finisher, and Dylan Brooks, everybody knows a play finisher. He's having a really good season so far. They could use some more playmaking. And Jalen Green don't really provide that. Again, I would tell the fan bases that are, I guess, arguing about him or mad at him, give the young man a little bit more time. That was what I would tell him. Matt says, what is your take on the whole Jalen Brunson and Becky Hammon thing? For the people at home that are out of the loop, Becky Hammon is a Hall of Fame WNBA player, Hall of Fame basketball player, and she also is the coach of the Aces right now, and they won a championship recently. She's doing some TV work, and she was asked about the Knicks, and she mentioned, this is her exact quote verbatim, at least part of her quote. You got to have a dude. You got to have a 1A dude, and they're missing that at the end of the day if they're just getting, if we're just getting down to brass taxes. She mentioned the reason why she doesn't look at Jalen Brunson as a 1A is because he's too small. And historically, throughout the game of basketball, it takes a special type of talent, the Steph Currys of the world, the Isaiah Thomases of the world, and I'm talking about Zeke Isaiah Thomas, to have a guard, a small guard specifically, be your number 1 guy to win a championship. Perk, who was on the set with her, pushed back on that and say, hey, Jalen Brunson is that guy right now. And then it got a lot of discourse, and it actually got to the point where Becky Hammon had to put together an entire apology statement, which I felt bad about, because no way you should have an NBA opinion and feel that you need to apologize for it. Because though I don't agree with what she's saying completely, she didn't just pull it out of her ass. She looked at the last 75 years of basketball and said, hell, winning a championship with a small guard is just inherently tough. And I can say, based on history, that's facts. But also, I think that we're going to the next stage of basketball where the history, and though there's going to be, for the most part, history is going to repeat itself in times, but because of the way we shoot the basketball as an NBA, and I'm acting like I'm in the damn league for whatever reason, the amount of three-point shots we get up and the effectiveness of those three-point shots, I do believe that you could have a small guard be your 1A. But I also don't believe that Jalen Brunson is that right now, and that's okay. That doesn't mean that Jalen Brunson is not an all-star. That doesn't mean that once the time is coming and you ask me to pull out an all-NBA ballot that Jalen Brunson is not, he's a name I'm going to contemplate. But we have to remember what winning a championship is. It's the hardest thing to do in sports. It's the hardest thing to do in sports. And there's a reason why the Knicks are still trying to acquire another star, because Jalen Brunson as is just not enough. And again, that's completely okay. Jalen Brunson is an amazing basketball player. But historically, throughout the history of basketball, forget about his size being a smaller guard, because again, I said that I think that history is going to say that you can get away with that eventually. Historically, you need a top 10 player. And I feel like that's a part of history that will continue to be the case for as long as we go. You're gonna need a top 10 player. And can we say that Jalen Brunson is top 10 right now? I don't think he's top 10. And I had to pause, and this is in no specific order, but I put together 10 players that I believe at this moment in time are better than Jalen Brunson. Jokic, Steph Curry, Joel Embiid, Giannis, Luka, Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, Shea, KD, Bron. And that's 10. That's 10. He's not top 10, which again is fine. You typically need a top 10 player. That's all. Shout out to JB. I mean, the man has been phenomenal, but I just think that they, as a team, could use a little bit more. And I said in the podcast episodes, 2 episodes ago, I was asked a question, what is a team that is one piece away? I mentioned the Knicks as that team. I'm a believer in their ability, if they are able to pull off let's just say all-star caliber trade, not even superstar caliber trade, that they can make some noise. And the last question comes from Jacob. What are your favorite/least favorite broadcasting teams? Make a tier list of all of them. That's just a little bit too much, Jacob. I'm not making a tier list, but I can give you my 3 top ones and my 3 bottom ones. Let's talk about the bottom right now, because I'm a guy that's all about embracing the positivity of the game of basketball. So I hate doing negative. So let's get them out of the way. I despise the Boston Celtics broadcast. I despise the Golden State Warriors broadcast. And I don't want to say I despise it. Those bottom 2 are the bottom 2. It's for me, again, this is just my own personal experience. I also just don't really like the Atlanta Hawks broadcast. All right. If the options are to listen to the Atlanta Hawks or the opposing team, as long as they not going against the Warriors or not going against the Celtics, I'm gonna listen to the opposing team. And I think one thing that is important for fans at home when they're watching is to have their commentary group have a little bit of fandom, a little bit of biases towards the team they're covering. It's just inevitable, and I think it's actually important to have some of it. But those 3 teams specifically have a little bit more than my liking. Listen, my favorite broadcast is my Chicago Bulls broadcast, and I would be lying to you if I said they weren't biased here. They undoubtedly are. But those 3 teams just take the cake. So let me transition. I'm not even going to count my Bulls because they're my favorite. You should know that. Anyway. My 3 other favorites, New York Knicks. It does not, come on, man. And this is no specific order, but New York Knicks, it's hard to beat that. Because I think that broadcasting is not just the people on the microphone, it's the atmosphere of the games that they're calling. The atmosphere in the Mecca adds to it. And they also have an elite level broadcasting booth, right? My number 2, again, not in a specific order, the Portland Trail Blazers, man. I love watching the Portland Trailblazers and listening to their commentary group. There are games, and this is no joke, like this is real life, where, you know, the Trailblazers have the last game of the night in a lot of cases. Sometimes I'm basketball out, where the West Coast games I don't watch in real time. I'll come back in the morning and watch. There are times where I'm not even watching the Blazers game, but I'll have it up and listening to the commentary. Not watching the game, but listening to the commentary. It is an elite level broadcasting booth. And my last one, it hurts because this is a team that for the foreseeable future I probably won't be watching much of. The Toronto Raptors. Is it Matt Devlin over there? I think it's Matt Devlin. I love their broadcast. I don't know what it is about it. He just has a way with it, you know? But they're one of the teams that I'm just not watching actively. You feel me? Hopefully you understand. Everybody outside of Toronto probably understands. But the people in Toronto watching this, like, Kenny, how can you say that? They're one of my favorite broadcasting booths, but it's hard to watch them right now. So I do want to say this as we get to this last team. And this last team, I maybe should have ordered it a little bit better because there's not a ton to say compared to the first two teams. Whatever. When I think about contending teams across basketball, I think at the top of the show I mentioned that we're going to see most teams make trades. And I'm kind of thinking about it. I don't know how true that is this year. I feel like there are five contending teams that have their roster is their roster. The Suns, your roster is your roster. They might make some small change. They might have a buyout player. They might trade their 10th man, their rotation for somebody else's 10th man. For the most part, your roster is your roster. The Milwaukee Bucks, your roster is your roster. Boston Celtics have an opportunity to add one player with a Grant Williams trade exception. But for the most part, their roster is their roster. Minnesota, Denver, and the Clippers. Those teams I'm expecting to maybe make some deals, but not anything that's going to be like, oh my God, you know. But there's one team, a team that I'm actively rooting for them to make not a trade, but multiple trades. It's the Atlanta Hawks. I think it's back to the drawing board when it comes to building around Trae Young. And maybe, in some people's opinions, it's back to the drawing board and building anything. Some people have already given up on Trae Young as a player. I am not at that point yet. I still do believe in Trae Young as a guard. He's having a phenomenal season, especially the last month or so. But the idea of having DeJounte Murray, DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, just the core in itself just hasn't meshed well. And I got to see that firsthand here in Chicago a couple days ago where Jalen Johnson just come back. And he had been, and I said this before, and I got some Twitter backlash, if that's even really a thing. I had said that before Jalen Johnson's injury, you can argue that he was the second best player on the team for them. And I know DeJounte's there and he was averaging 20. But as far as full-on impact, outside of the one game, DeJounte went crazy against, what was that, the Timberwolves, like the day before Halloween. But for the most part, in my eyes, when I watched that team play, Jalen Johnson had been that impactful of a player, and they missed him for a month time. So they're not good actively, but Jalen Johnson just came back. But this is a team that I believe should be still making moves. The DeJounte Murray, Trae Young thing just does not work. When you have this long of a time, was it 2 seasons and some change of a pairing, and you haven't seen the benefits of it, it's probably time. The DeAndre Hunter piece as your wing that's going to be 3-and-D hasn't worked. It's probably time. The Clint Capella transition to get Onyeka Okongwu, it's probably time. And hell, I'm saying that a day after I just watched Drummond give Onyeka Okongwu 25 rebounds. Like, I just watched that. It is time to make that shift. And some of those players I mentioned to be traded will have some value. The problem with it is that the easy trades are the ones where you're bottoming out. Hell, we're going to trade DeJounte for draft capital, and we're going to reset our team. Now, if you keep it Trae Young, obviously you're not resetting your team. That is the difficulty in trading these players, because when you're not trying to bottom out, at least in most cases, maybe they are. Maybe they will try to trade Trae Young as well, but I doubt that. You're not trying to bottom out, but you need to make trades to help Trae Young. A person that's buying DeJounte Murray is typically not trying to give you the pieces that's making them win because they're trying to buy to add on to winning. Those are the trades that are hardest to do. And I can't wait to see exactly what they do because, I've been disappointed. I've been very vocal about my disappointment because before the season started, you asked me who my second team was, the team I'm expecting to take a jump, the team I'm actively rooting for outside of my Bulls. It was the Atlanta Hawks. And we got into the week of the season, and I said, what the hell? Why the hell did I pick this team? Jalen Johnson was the reason. I knew he was going to have a great season, and I've been right on that so far. But, man, it's been bad. And when you think about it being a couple seasons of this core, it's about time. It's about time. It's about time. What are they sitting at right now? They're outside of the play-in after losing to the Bulls, 3-game losing streak actively, 12-18. I ain't a person in the world that convinced me it's not time. So it is. All right, man, that's the end of this episode of the Kenny Beecham Podcast. Hopefully you did enjoy. I'm going to remind you again to leave a like and subscribe. And then this is a fluid and open conversation. You can hit me up on Twitter or X at KOT4Q. You can comment down below. You can hit me up on Instagram. Don't remember what my Instagram ad is. Actually, don't hit me up on Instagram. I'm not there. That would be lying to you to tell you to hit me up on the gram because I'm not there. But Twitter, in the comment section, we are here. So I appreciate you as always. Let me know what you think about the new format because I'm figuring it out. I'm figuring it out as we go. And we'll see. I'll see you tomorrow.